chaps. So in the last lesson, I found you a video, I think hopefully a bit useful, about what I tried to get you from this lesson to understand how does a power station work? How do we generate electricity? It's very difficult to imagine our world, our life without electricity. Okay? So how do we actually make electricity in what they call power thermal stations? Today we're going to look at what different energy sources we can use to create electricity. Okay? But it's important to understand how that process happens, at least in the fossil fuel ones. And I want to just show you one little thing that happens in the generator. Okay? So, now, very quickly, okay, so we take the fuel, okay, we burn it, create some kind of burning, okay? That heats up the water, boils the water, okay? That means we get steam, okay? The steam then runs through the turbines, turns the turbine. This is kind of like the turbine, okay? And then this is where the magic happens, okay? The turbines turn some kind of magnets or coils inside magnets, okay? I'll just show you here, okay? You're going to learn what actually happens in the generator in, I think, grade 11 or 12, but to me that's fascinating. So turbines turning just like this here, and you can see that what I've got here, this is actually coil. Okay, I don't know how well you can see. This is coiled, and they are inside the magnet. This is a magnet. So when we turn the coil around the magnet, that's when the kinetic energy becomes electric energy in the wires. I'm going to go quickly switch off the light, and hopefully then you will see that this electric energy is eventually converted to light energy in the bulb. So just hang on there. Hey, let's give it a go. Right, so I'm going to spin that turbine, which you can see turns into that kinetic energy becomes electric energy in a generator in some magical process that you're going to learn in grade 11, and that becomes light energy. And that's how electricity generated. Okay, let's pause you here. Okay, so what we're going to do in this lesson, the main thing is to look at all the different energy resources, because in this process, converting some energy resource into electricity, we, not always, but almost always have to have some kind of spinning turbine. There are a couple of exceptions, and I'll talk about that. So we need to make that turbine spin. Okay? Now, before I start, just to let you know, pause me now, have a look, because I've given you some work. I've asked you to write down very briefly for each one of the energy resources that I'm going to speak on now. You need to write, first of all, in one sentence, seriously, one sentence, how is energy converted? Okay? So that's honestly just one line answer. No, I'm not looking for a deep answer. Secondly, one advantage, okay, at least one advantage for its energy resource and at least one disadvantage. Okay? And you can use what I'm going to say now. Okay, so you can write down the answer. If I were you, I would just write the answers as I speak and then just pause me every time. Or you can go on research. That's absolutely fine. Okay? There will be maybe some energy resources where I'm not going to say what's the advantage and disadvantage, and I'm just going to let you try and figure it out. Okay? So let's start by dividing our energy resources into renewable and non-renewable. Okay? What does that mean? So let's look at the example. Non-renewable, the main energy resource we talk about non-renewable is what we call fossil fuels. What are fossil fuels? Okay? When animals and plants die, okay, they get buried into the ground. They get squashed by more soil that compresses them from above. They get baked by heat that comes from the core of the earth. Okay? And their material changes eventually into one of three, or it could change into one of these three forms. Okay? Oil, which is that, not oil we cook with, it's that black oil stuff that we make petrol from. Coal, okay, again, that's not charcoal, okay, it's not charcoal that we use in the braai, it's actually a rock, a really hard black rock that we can burn, okay, and natural gas, okay, natural gas is like the cooking gas that we use. Okay, so it depends on the level of compression and temperature and all that stuff. Dead material, living material, dead organic material can form natural gas, coal, and oil, which we can then burn. That's why we call them fossil fuels, because it's like fossils. Okay? Now, these are non-renewable energy resources. Why? Because once we burn coal, once we burn gas or oil, we cannot reuse them. We cannot reuse. That's it. Use it once, that's it. Now, that's not to say that more fossil fuels are generated. When we die and we get buried and plants die, okay, non-renewable, the fossil fuels continues to be generated. But the rate that we use that fossil fuel far exceeds the rate that is generated. So if we carry on using these fossil fuels, they will run out. Okay, some will say in 50 years, some will say in 200 years, but they will run out eventually. Okay? Right, what is renewable energy resources? Like wind, solar, tides, okay, they cannot run out because they just keep on coming there. When we use them, we don't waste them, we don't finish them. Okay, that's the difference between renewable and non-renewable. So we spoke already about fossil fuel. Okay? The main disadvantage, there's two main disadvantages for them. One is that they will run out eventually. And the second one is that when we burn these fossil fuels inside the boiler to heat up the water, they release all kind of pollution. Don't just say pollution. The worst thing to say in the test, they pollute there. You need to be specific. Okay, yes, there are some poisonous gas, and that's not the best thing, but that's not really the main issue. The main issue is they release carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, climate change. Okay? We've got one more non-renewable energy resource, and that's a nuclear energy. Now, nuclear energy resources, we mainly talk about uranium and a few other elements, which we actually have in mine in South Africa. These are material we mine from the rocks, and we don't burn them. Okay? We don't burn them. We don't set them on fire. That would be a disaster. But by just putting it together, they become really, really hot under certain conditions. There's some kind of reaction called fission, which unfortunately you don't learn in physical science in South Africa, but it's very, very important, okay? Fission, okay? And that reaction releases a lot of heat. So that heat can heat up water, which becomes steam, which turns a turbine, and the rest, we spoke about that, okay? Now, that is a non-renewable energy resource. In other words, when we use the uranium, we can't reuse it, okay? And it's not actually being generated, so it eventually will run out. But one advantage of it is that it releases a lot of energy, okay? So it will take a long time to run out. We've got a lot of that stuff. The main disadvantage, there's one more advantage. Even though it's a non-renewable energy resource, when we burn it, we don't really burn it, but when we use it, it doesn't release carbon dioxide. So there are a lot of people who say this is the way. Okay, nuclear energy is the way, because by using it, we're not releasing more carbon dioxide. I personally disagree with that, because the main disadvantage of nuclear energy is that it's dangerous. Okay, I'm sure you all heard about it. Okay, there have been accidents, Chernobyl, Fukushima. Okay, when things go wrong, and things eventually go wrong. Okay, when things go wrong, it's catastrophic, which is not the same for fossil fuels and other energy resources. Okay, so in my opinion, that's not the way forward. Okay, I did forget to mention an advantage for fossil fuels. Okay, there's one main advantage for fossil fuels. They're still very readily available. There still seems to be plenty around, maybe less, but still plenty, and they're relatively cheap. Right now, they are the cheapest way of creating electricity. Now that can be argued, that some people will say, and I'm one of them, it is only cheap because we subsidize it, okay? Remember there was a talk about building, there's building plants all the time. The government invests money to build these power plants. If instead the governments around the world will say, all right, no, we want to invest in renewable energy, then suddenly that will be cheap. So fossil fuels is cheap because this is what we invest our money in it, all of us. Okay. Right, I think I'm going to pause here and I'll do a separate video to renewable energy.